I just got out of the shower, so you'll have to forgive me if I'm not drier than that time your mom conceived you. Of course, that is a joke, but that's probably going to be the only joke that I tell in this video. So in case you've been living under a rock, the head of the government of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, has been kidnapped, taken to the city of New York for a trial for the alleged crimes of facilitating narco-terrorism. And I say allegedly because that is the claim of the Trump administration, and I have no way of proving such a claim because I'm not the one who is so hyper-obsessed with the country of Venezuela. There's also something that needs to be said about Zoran Mamdani, the current mayor of New York City. Given that this guy proclaims to be a socialist and is a member of the Democratic Socialists of America, on top of the fact that he said he would arrest Benjamin Netanyahu if he stepped foot in New York City, one would think that his stance on imperialism is that he stands opposed to it. But as mayor, I don't know.
I was briefed by my first deputy mayor, my chief of staff, my chief counsel, the police commissioner, as well as other members of my team. I called the president and spoke with him directly to register my opposition to this act and to make clear that it was an opposition based on being opposed to a pursuit of regime change, to the violation of federal and international law, and a desire to see that be consistent each and every day.
Wait, that's it?
I registered my opposition, I made it clear, and we left it at that.
My suspicions of Zoran Mamdani were not unfounded. He is trying to play within the system and trying to reform it from within. But this is the extent of his power. Because in the face of fascism, liberals don't have any power except to capitulate to the status quo. Keep in mind, Zoran Mamdani actually has real political power over the jurisdiction of New York City. So while you're at home hearing about how Donald Trump's administration is transporting Nicolás Maduro to New York City, Zoran Mamdani's empty fucking words about his opposition to Donald Trump's actions is meaningless and irrelevant here. I am like a mop right now. But let's be real with ourselves for a second here. There is nothing about any of this that has anything to do with drugs. No, on the contrary, in fact, drugs play no role in this situation. Because even if the United States government, specifically the Trump administration, does go as far as to find that there is evidence to suggest that Nicolás Maduro's government is trafficking drugs into the country of the United States of America, that's not what this is about. Considering that we're talking about the criminality of drugs here, Donald Trump has been outed as a rapist of a 13-year-old and then facilitated that 13-year-old's uncle to murder the child of that 13-year-old. It is in the Epstein files, and the source that I got the screenshot from is from the Department of Justice. Donald Trump is not only a child rapist, but he's also a child killer. It sounds like I'm quite literally describing Albert Fish, not even for comedic effect. Not to mention, didn't Albert Fish also happen to live in New York City? So let's not pretend that this is about stomping crime or stomping terrorism or stomping the trafficking of drugs into the United States of America. What this is about is oil, through the means of maintaining control in Latin America.
As everyone knows, the oil business in Venezuela has been a bust, a total bust, for a long period of time. They were pumping almost nothing by comparison to what they could have been pumping and what could have taken place. We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country.
Which is a tradition that has been repeated time and again throughout American history. I previously made a video on my channel about how the United States through 100 years have maintained control in the country of Guatemala for the sake of helping Dole Food and Chiquita Banana maintain control over that country's infrastructure so that way they could maximize profits here at home selling you guys bananas. But Guatemala is not even the only instance of that either. In fact, I highly recommend watching Harvest of Empire, a documentary and book that was created by Juan Gonzalez from Democracy Now!, which excellently highlights all of that. There's a lot of history, not just within Latin American countries, but also U.S. territories like Puerto Rico that are quite literally being coerced to serve the United States empire against their will. I do think you should watch it, and yes, the documentary is on YouTube, free to watch. Now, some people have gone as far as to call what is going on in Venezuela, Iraq, 2.0. Right now, the United States government is perpetuating lies that a foreign nation is producing something that is harmful to anyone else that is not that country and exporting it in order to do something bad. In Iraq's case, it was weapons of mass destruction, even though Al-Qaeda was, headquartered in Afghanistan at the time. Because let's be real, what did we learn from the invasion of Iraq? It was regime change. They executed Saddam Hussein. L. Paul Bremer pretty much literally created ISIS in the process. And the United States empire maintained brutal control in that part of the world for 2 decades. So my educated guess is that this is the same thing. This is the United States taking over a specific nation state in Latin America to maintain control over that country. Now, I know that some of you in the comment section are going to be asking that because I'm an anarchist, I shouldn't really be necessarily caring as to whether or not a leader of a nation state be, literally kidnapped and possibly killed. The thing is that it has nothing to do with Nicolás Maduro himself. It's not really vindicative as to whether or not I think he is or is not a good or bad political leader. This has nothing to do with that. What this has to do is with the United States maintaining control over another government that it has no right to put its greedy little fingers into. Because this is a pattern, you see. This is a pattern that continues to perpetuate itself throughout history, and it's continuing to this very day. The same can be said for Western media that's trying to bend the narrative that Venezuelans like what's going on with Nicolás Maduro. Again, this has nothing to do with that, because the United States, under any other circumstance, would not do what it is currently doing right now to so-called liberate its people. For example, in Chechnya, the Russian Federation, they have literal concentration camps for LGBTQ plus people in that part of the country. If the United States' agenda was about liberation, an often way too fabricated and way too overstated narrative that continues to completely blindside people for some reason, they would have already liberated, quote unquote, all of those LGBTQ plus people in that part of the world. The same can be said for that one time the United States helped the Kurdish people, Rojava, the YPG, YPJ, fight ISIS. Again, this had nothing to do with Kurdish liberation. This had to do with a mutually shared goal of defeating ISIS. Once the Kurdish people were able to defeat ISIS, the United States withdrew, and Turkey continued to plummet and bomb the Kurdish people. So then do you think that the United States government is going to look at that situation and be like, oh shit, we didn't finish the job, we got to go back in and protect the Kurdish people? No, because Turkey, like the United States, is a member of NATO. That means every atrocity that Turkey does, from the Armenian genocide all the way to the repression and violent slaughter of Kurdish people, the United States is literally politically obligated to look the other way. So then when we look at this situation with Venezuela, it is perfectly clear that this has nothing to do with stopping drugs being funneled into the country. Because this really has to do with extracting oil. This really has to do with making profits for billionaires of the oil industry and the weapons manufacturing industry.
We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars.
A specific capitalist industry that our government loves to exploit the hell out of.
A lot of Americans from all walks of life wonder why we can't come together and get legislation necessary to end the ban on offshore drilling.
And I know that there are going to be some people who will also try to make the argument that this is a waste of U.S. taxpayer dollars.
I'm an American citizen. It's my tax dollars. I'm selfish. I'm an American patriot.
That's not what this is even about. Like, sure, this is like a no-brainer. That is true, that it is a waste of your taxpayer dollars. But that's not really the important thing here. The important thing is that the United States, once again, is asserting control in a place where it does not belong. I mean, granted, the United States does not belong here on stolen land, but the United States should not even be doing that in the first place. We need to recognize that this is a pattern, something that happens again and again and again. Because what happens when in 20 years you get some Democrat politician, some liberal politician, some quote-unquote progressive politician who decides to rehabilitate the image of Donald John Trump, much like how the liberals are currently doing with George W. Bush and his war on terror and his war over in the Middle East, completely maintaining a brutal control over in the Middle East for 20 fucking years.
But during the game, they showed a shot of George and me laughing together, and so people were upset. They thought, why is a gay Hollywood liberal sitting next to a conservative Republican president? Didn't even notice I'm holding the brand new iPhone 11.
Because he's a fucking war criminal, dumbass. He slaughtered millions and millions of people under his regime. Does that not mean anything to you?
Here's the thing. I'm friends with George Bush. In fact, I'm friends with a lot of people who don't share the same beliefs that I have. We're all different, and I think that we've forgotten that that's okay, that we're all different. When I say be kind to one another, I don't mean only the people that think the same way that you do. I mean be kind to everyone.
Which tells me that either you have no standards or you're willing to compromise on your own alleged principles. Which gives me reasonable doubt that the liberals will hold the Trump administration to account in 20 to 30 years, and they will remember his legacy in softer words than Donald Trump's regime honestly deserves. What are you gonna do in 20 years from now when the liberals start doing that to Trump? Are you gonna say that the kidnapping of Nicolás Maduro was acceptable? No. Because then what that does is that it sets a precedent for even the most liberal of US presidents to go do the same fucking thing that Donald Trump is doing right now. And given that the last administration, the Biden administration, facilitated the beginning of a fucking genocide in Palestine at the hands of Israel using US taxpayer dollars, that should tell you that this is less about taxpayer dollars themselves and more about United States trying to maintain control and hegemony in the world. We need to make sure that our solidarity with the working class is that it is international solidarity, not necessarily just solidarity with American working class people. Because we need to recognize that this does not just affect us at home, it affects everyone. If we let this shit go uncorrected, we are setting a precedent that this can continue to happen time and again for the future. I want to encourage people to continue to push for international solidarity in your labor unions and to talk to people about this. Don't just listen to me and keep this in your head. Talk to people about this. Talk to your neighbors about this. Talk to your friends about this. Talk to your families about this. Because even if these things don't necessarily affect them directly, at the end of the day, if you don't do anything about it, you are setting a precedent that it is okay for it to happen to other people as well. You could be next.